Anchors up, sails are full. Welcome to the Sloopcast. How are you doing today, Kyle?
Doing pretty well, Jared. How are you today on this lovely Know Your Enemy episode?
This is the enemiest of the Know Your Enemies. This is the Know Your Enemy that we prepare for all year. This is the enemy. This is the final boss. I know that there are still games left to be played. Jared, it's not. Yes, it is. This is the final boss. This is what it all. This is what matters. Everything else is ending credits. Everything else is wrapping up storylines. This is the climactic end. The college football playoff is just DLC. Damn it, Austin, stop being funnier than me. I'm not happy about that. Well, the college football playoff is just new game plus. Nah, DLC's still better.
Yeah.
Let's
just go ahead and jump right into it. Know your enemy, the cheaters up north.
The people in the Discord have been calling them T. Is it the T Kun? The cheaters up north. I don't know why we don't call them the cheater up north team personally. Don't think about that joke too hard, or I'll get demonetized. This is it, Kyle. Yeah, this is it. This is the Wolverine episode.
Yeah, so we could be going through here with running through a lot of numbers, a lot of watch for this player, watch for that player, but really what we really need to focus on here, Jared, is the stats from Michigan State and before versus after Michigan State. Looking at those stats, looking at those numbers, seeing the difference in this offense, because the defense is still really good. The defense is really good, even after everything went down during the Michigan State week.
I think that
offensively, things have changed quite a bit. Things changed quite a bit since the Michigan State week.
Well, Kyle, let me. I don't know about that, because like we can talk about how the offense has gotten worse, and it has, but we can also talk about how Penn State actually has a very good defense with all their shortcomings on offense, and Penn State has plenty. With all their shortcomings on offense, Penn State is still a very talented, very well-coached defensive football team. Maryland, their offense is good, but it's not great. They're not incredibly consistent. They're explosive. Baby Tua can make big plays, but he can also make big plays, such as a pick six, such as a getting stripped on a sack. You live by Baby Tua, you die by Baby Tua. So, we can talk about, their defense looks much worse, or their defense still looks pretty good, but their offense looks much worse, which is still true, because the Maryland defense is not very good, and the Michigan offense struggled against them mightily. But they've not really played an offense with anywhere near the talent that Ohio State has. And I say talent instead of just as good as the Ohio State offense is, because Ohio State's offense has consistency issues. I don't have to tell Ohio State fans watching that.
Yeah.
Um,
Looking at this here, Jared. I'll start with the quarterback and running back here. McCarthy here. Ever since after Michigan State, McCarthy has not thrown a touchdown and has thrown one pick in 3 games. 0 touchdowns, 1 interception in 3 games. Averaging about, if I'm reading this correctly, he's averaging less than 60% completion percentage. And
it is not
yeah,
Dustin.
not good. Especially, yeah, he went to town against Purdue because he kind of had to because Purdue was stopping the run. The Penn State number looks bad, but that's because they didn't even pass the second half.
Well, hold on though, Kyle. Why didn't they pass in the second half?
Because they couldn't.
You see my point? Like, why didn't they run, or why did they choose not to let? I don't know how many times, because we were watching it. We weren't. This wasn't a Discord game, but this wasn't one of the group watch games in the Discord. But we were like chatting as the game was going, just texting, chatting. And I'm telling you right now, I don't know how many times I said during the course of that game, man, Michigan's offense was looking really good until they tried to let JJ McCarthy actually do something.
Yeah, and they gave the ball off to Corum, and he had his best game of the season by far. Like, it's not even close. Would you be surprised if I told you, Jared, Corum has only had 2 100+ yard games all season?
I'm more interested in the team rushing yards, if I'm being honest, because Edwards does get a lot of carries. And
yeah, so as a team, yes, they do get over 100 yards a game, well over that, but yeah. So going to
as a team, they get about 4.5 yards per rush, which puts them 47th in the country, which I was surprised by. Like, I can go through all the stats. Like, I feel like during Know Your Enemy, the past, ever since October, I go through all the stats, and I can go through all these stats. Opponents' points per game. Michigan is number 1 in the country, only allowing 9 points per game. Yards per game, number 1 in the country. But how much of that actually matters? How much of that actually matters? Or how much of that, should I say, can we actually trust?
Yeah. Well, I was
every
getting to
game
that with,
before Purdue has an asterisk next to it.
Well, I mean, here's the thing I wanted to pull up. So, looking at Blake Corum here, his averages per game here looked pretty good. In their preseason games, over 7 yards, 5 yards, 8 yards, 7 yards that he had per game here. But then after Michigan State, 2.9 yards per game. He had 5.5 against Penn State because he went off and had to. But then against Maryland, he had 3.4. Definitely very significant, a lot less yards per game or yards per rush compared to pre-Purdue week here. And yes, he gets a lot of touchdowns, but when you look at his touchdowns, they're only in the just a few yards out, and then they give the ball off, which rightfully they should with that offensive line, and then he gets those easy touchdowns. And so I think his rushing touchdowns, which he's had 20 for the year, and you look at that, it's like, wow, he has 20 rushing touchdowns. That's great. But that's because that's all they do in the red zone is just hand the ball off to him, and then he goes behind those big offensive linemen there.
I see.
So what I'm trying to get at here is that the rushing hasn't been as what it used to be.
No.
Pre-Purdue.
And honestly, as I was going down through these stats, which I'm not going to read through all of them like I normally would, because again, Everything before Purdue gets an asterisk. But even with that asterisk, they're 47th in the country yards per rush. I was surprised by that. With so many top 10, because they have a lot of top 10 statistics, I was expecting a incredibly high yards per rush, something in the top 10, and it's not. It's 47th in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And considering that they're one of the top teams in the country as far as rush versus pass share at roughly 60-40, I was expecting better, if I'm being honest. I was expecting over 5 yards per carry. But by the way, people are starting to share some game or some final score predictions in the chat. Austin says 38-23. Esquire said 31-20. Those are good scores if you're Ohio State. Those are good scores if you're Ohio State. The more points scored, the better for Ohio State, in my opinion. In my mind, I can't get past like 24-17. I think that this game hits the under. What is the over under on this?
46.5.
46.5. So that's about 23 points per team. I'm taking the under on that.
Yeah, what is that? 20. Yeah, that's like 21-24, something like that. So
the further you go over, the better news it is for Ohio State. In my opinion, if this is a game in which Michigan is allowed to put together 17 play drives, taking 9 minutes off the clock, it's bad news for Ohio State. The more plays run in this game, the better for Ohio State. The more points scored in this game, the better for Ohio State. But if this turns into, like I said, a game in which Michigan is allowed to 3 yards in a cloud of dust us to death, that's my biggest fear. Because I'm telling you right now, JJ McCarthy's never had to read a defense in his life. I'll say it. I'm tired of talking around Connor Stallions. JJ McCarthy has never had to read a defense in his life, and it's starting to show.
And I think you mentioned it earlier in the season, Jared. Week 3, they struggled heavily in the first half against Bowling Green. McCarthy.
Do you think they scouted Bowling Green? And you
Oh,
know what
good.
I mean. And you know what I mean when I say scouted.
McCarthy threw 3 interceptions in that game, and then they find like, hold on, let me look up something real quick here.
You know, they taped this. I mean, allegedly, presumably, I don't know anything. They were filming, studying the first half calls. They went to halftime. They figured them out. Came back in the second half and did what needed to be done. Maybe they think they didn't have to, or maybe someone tipped off Bowling Green to do something with their signals, and maybe those signals weren't working in the first half. I don't know.
Yeah. So going back to talking about how but the rushing attack hasn't been up to par. Looking at like last year's here, even like Donovan Edwards, we talked about last year, like Michigan starting the wrong running back.
Right.
Well, Donovan's not actually blowing people out this year either. He's averaging 3.4 yards per carry.
He's been playing better lately. He had a very rough start to the year. But then when I say lately, well,
is he?
Hold on. Then Connor Stallions happens. But he was starting to come on.
I want to agree with that. Looking at against Purdue, 2.6 yards per carry.
That's post Connor
against
Stallions.
Maryland. against Maryland 3.5. Okay, before that, Michigan State 2.3, Indiana 2.2, Nebraska 3.4, Rutgers 2.2. He's not rushing that well this year per carry.
I thought he started to look
Not
better.
compared to last year. Last year he was averaging 7.5 yards per pop.
Yeah.
And he's well under 50% of that.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Connor Stallions and the sign stealing and all of that, I think a lot of people have focused on the Michigan defense knowing what the opponent's offense is doing. I think that's been a large part of people's focus, a large part of the narrative, and I don't think enough attention's been paid the other way around.
Agreed. Completely agree.
You know, we talk about that offensive line and how that offensive line, despite being just as talented as last year's offensive line, hasn't looked quite as good this year. And we talk a lot about
show that.
And we talk a lot about, you know, JJ McCarthy and how even though he doesn't necessarily look spectacular, his completion percentage, at least before the past two games, was something like 76%. I think it's still pretty high because he didn't throw it that many times against either Penn State or Maryland to affect the overall average. Right now, the completion percentage for the team at least sits at 73.5%, which puts them second in the country. It was Joe Burrow high before the scandal broke. Yeah. But not even then, because even then it was very dink and dunk. And it's almost like he knew where to put the ball most of the time or something. It's almost like he knew what was coming. Crazy talk, Jared. I know. And here's the thing. Eat your nothing burger and enjoy it. Here's the thing. It is a thing that really, when I'm watching the Maryland Michigan game, and what I saw was Maryland not allowing JJ McCarthy to run out of the pocket a lot. Because quite frankly, JJ McCarthy's a lot better on the run than he is standing in the pocket.
Yes, yeah. We saw that last year.
So the question becomes, hey, a lot of outside pressure. But here's the thing. If you know where that pressure was coming from previously, if you knew where the blitz calls were coming from previously, and now you suddenly don't know where those blitz calls are coming from, as we saw in the Maryland game, as we saw in the Penn State game, it makes that rollout game a lot tougher. It makes it a lot tougher to roll away from the blitz if you don't know where the blitz is coming before the play. The offensive line suddenly doesn't look so good when you can't roll away from the blitz every time. If you don't know where the blitz is coming, if you don't know what defensive scheme the secondary's in, all of a sudden, playing quarterback gets real tough, huh? Mm-hmm. JJ McCarthy. I don't think this is a very good Michigan offense. And I think that, again, so much of the narrative around the Connor Stallions Michigan sign stealing scandal has been about Michigan's defense. Because for whatever reason, I think casual audiences, casual football fans, whenever they think about play calling, they think about offense. I think most casual football fans see play calling as an offensive thing. And they don't understand the complexities, or they don't understand the nuances of defensive play calls. Like a lot of people might know, like, well, they think of defensive play calls as schemes, not play calls. You know, there's the cover 2 scheme or the cover 3 scheme or a man on man scheme. They will think about schemes in terms of defensive play calling, but they don't necessarily think about individual defensive play calls. Those are two separate things. One's a category of plays versus like the actual play calls. Yeah, but here's the revelation. Teams run all of those at different times. Yeah. But it's sort of like saying, sometimes you run a 3 wide, sometimes you run a 5 wide, sometimes you run a shotgun, sometimes you run, you know what I mean? Sometimes you run the ball, sometimes you pass the ball, sometimes you run a short pass, sometimes you run a long pass. Well, you know that, Jared. It's called a podcast G's. No, I agree with you. I'm doing the it's called a podcast G's thing of explaining it, Austin.
We talked a lot
watching the Penn State game and watching especially the Maryland game has totally shifted my confidence in regards to this game. Now, that's not me saying that I feel super confident that Ohio State's going to win, because I'm not super confident that Ohio State's going to win. I think this is still a close football game. Let me be very clear. I think Ohio State also has some glaring deficiencies, and I think that I think that Michigan is well equipped and well positioned to take advantage of those deficiencies.
Mm-hmm. All right. So pretty much talked all about the offense here. Defensively, so very, very talented defense here, in all levels, linebackers, defensive line,
tackles,
corners and corners and safeties are pretty solid. I don't think as much as last year, but they're still pretty solid.
I agree. Their strength is in their front seven, and that's not me disrespecting their secondary. That's me respecting their front seven. Just to be clear, like, I think their front seven, cheating or no, sign stealing or no, their front seven is still insanely talented, and their secondary is also talented. I don't think they're insanely talented the way that the front seven's insanely talented, but they're by no means deficient and by no means bad. They're still very good. The Michigan defensive line is incredibly good. The linebackers are very good, and the secondary is pretty good, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Colson and Barrett, 2 linebackers, that's leading the team in tackles. They got a great pickup in Mason Graham, who's been very stellar in the inside for Michigan here. As a defensive tackle, you got 3 sacks for the year. That's pretty good. But also their defensive ends getting a lot of pressure as well. Harrell has 6.5 sacks, and Stewart has 4.5 sacks as well. Going to get a lot of pressure on McCord here. And the big question we've talked about all year, Jared, was this offensive line. Can it improve, and can it slow down some of these pass rushers? And this is their biggest test of the year here. Is can they slow down Harrell and Stewart and Page and Colson and all of them to slow them down?
Hey, Kyle, I just did some quick math. If you want to talk about after Purdue and before Purdue, before Stallions, after Stallions, Michigan has given up 48 points. Given up 48 points since the Connor Stallions news broke.
Mm-hmm.
That's over 3 games. In the 8 games prior, they gave up 47 points.
Interesting.
And I did very quick math on that. So someone feel free to fact check me on that. But I think that's right. My ADHD ass can't do mental math, but pretty sure that's right.
52. 52 points in 3 games.
In the last 3 games?
In the last 3 games. 24, 15, 13 is 52.
Yeah. I see what I did wrong. So 52 to 47. It makes it even worse. That makes it even worse. 17.3 points per game.
Which is still really good. Which is still pretty good.
Still pretty good.
As a defense.
But a far cry away from their overall 9-point something average that they currently have.
It was well below that, I thought.
Well, no, that's what it is right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying the first. I'm not saying the pre-Purdue games. It's good until you consider they played Penn State. That's a valid point. And also, like, Purdue isn't a great team either. 5.875, Kyle.
In their 8 games, their first 8 games.
Before Connor Stallions,
tripling.
Basically, roughly, they're giving up 3 times as many points per game after Connor Stallions versus pre-Connor Stallions. And again, consider that those opponents are Purdue, Penn State, and Maryland. Maryland has a pretty decent, but inconsistent, but decent offense. But Purdue and Penn State have terrible offenses.
Yep.
And for what it's worth, they didn't really play any good offenses before that in the first 8 games either.
No, they didn't.
Kyle, Maryland, the best offense they've played this year by far. By far.
I want to say by far, but yes.
No, by far.
Yes, they are.
Who's second?
It would be Penn State.
Buddy.
I'm not saying Penn State has a good offense.
But you're not giving me by
Maryland's
far.
Maryland's not that good either. It's Maryland, Penn State, a big divide, and then plug in whoever you want, Rutgers or whoever at third.
Rutgers is not the 3rd best offense they've played, Austin. I highly disagree with that. Rutgers, very good defensive team, but no. Not give. I would venture to say, I would probably say Minnesota is the 3rd best offense Nebraska now, but they played Nebraska in September, and Nebraska was still trying to figure shit out in September. So not Nebraska. Maybe if they played Nebraska, in November, but not now, not in September when they did play. I don't know. Like, I kind of want to go through all the stats, but the stats don't mean a hell of a lot, quite frankly.
Yeah. I think this is a good segue to tell our listeners here of like who should we watch out for? What is the difference in this game here?
We're moving into predictions. Is that what we're doing?
Since the stats don't really tell the whole story here, I think we should talk about who we should be looking out for in this game here. So yes, Jared, let's get into our predictions. Okay.
Ohio State players to watch. I'm cheating. I haven't done this all year. This is my opportunity to cheat. I'm doing 2 players. I'm doing Mike Hall and Tyreek Williams.
Cheater.
If Ohio State wants to win this game, plain and simple, if Ohio State wants to win this game, they cannot allow themselves to get 3-yard and a cloud of dusted to death. Period. Make JJ McCarthy beat you. because he's not gonna. This secondary that Ohio State has is tremendous. JJ McCarthy actually has to learn how to read a defense between last Saturday and this Saturday. And I don't think it's going to happen. But if you look at what Michigan did to Penn State in the second half of that football game, in which they never threw a pass that counted, Michigan only threw one pass, which statistically never happened because they got waved off by a penalty. Michigan didn't throw the ball once in the second half against Penn State. That to me is the Michigan offense that they're going to attempt to use against Ohio State. Because if Maryland's defensive ends and linebackers were able to blitz on the outside and contain the rollout of JJ McCarthy, well, then you better damn believe that Ohio State's defensive ends and linebackers are going to be able to do it too. Michigan has had some injury issues. I don't know what the status is, quite frankly, of their offensive tackles. They have some injury issues. I don't know, quite frankly, what the status is of Roman Wilson. I suspect he'll play. His injury didn't look that serious during the Maryland game, but I don't know. Colston Loveland will be the guy you have to stop. Luckily, Ohio State's tendency over the past 3 or 4 previous seasons of getting eaten alive by big white tight ends has seemed to have not been the issue so far this year. Mm-hmm. So, but Colston Loveland's still going to get his share. We'll see what's up with Roman Wilson. But, you got to look out for Colston Loveland for sure. But if Ohio State wants to win this game, they need to be stout up the middle. And that starts with Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams. My Ohio State players to watch.
Yeah, I'm going to go on the opposite side here because as you said here, Jared, earlier in the episode, if Ohio State can score points, that's good. Well, obviously that's good. That's duh. But the more points they can score, they're playing at their game that they want to. Michigan wants to keep this a low scoring game here, and if they can keep it low scoring, it's going to favor Michigan. So it's going to come down to the offensive line and how well they can stop this Michigan defensive line from making plays here. So I'm going with the weakest link here. I'm going with Josh Simmons is the player to watch. For Ohio State here.
I don't think he's the weakest link on the offensive line for what it's worth.
Okay, well, your left tackle here.
Last couple times
I know he's been getting a lot of help with the tight ends here, but to help especially a lot with those long deep pass plays, getting some help with the tight ends. But if he has a good game here, I think that's going to open up a lot of holes for Trey. It's going to give more protection for McCord to get the ball to Mecca and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Stover and all of them. So I think keep a close eye out for Josh Simmons.
Last couple times I saw an offensive tackle for Ohio State get ramshackled, it was Josh Myers. I think Simmons has gotten a lot better through the course of the season, but that is wrong. No, it is absolutely not. Or excuse me, Fryer. Josh Fryer. I don't know where Myers came from. Josh Fryer.
Right, enemy player to watch. I'm going to go with my theme here. It's going to be the defensive line for Michigan. I'm going to go with Jalen Harrell. very, very disruptive pass edge rusher there. 7.5 tackles for loss. 6.5 of those are sacks. 2 forced fumbles for the year. Big difference maker there. So player to watch for me is it's Jalen Harrell.
Going Zach Zinter, offensive guard for the Michigan offensive line. Again, you cannot let yourself get shoved off of the line. And Zach Zinter is Mr. Shove you off of the line. Ohio State's going to need to blitz intelligently. The defensive tackles are going to need to stand their ground. This Michigan interior offensive line is exceptional. And it's led largely by a very large man in Zach Zinter. Which leads me right into the key matchup of the game, which is the Ohio State interior defensive line versus the Michigan interior offensive line. We saw, I said it in the Know Your Enemy Maryland, I need to see the interior defensive line or just the defensive line in general not get pushed, because we have definitely seen that through October and November, through our own Purdue game and through the Wisconsin game and other games, just teams getting strong pushes right down the middle, and you simply can't, you'll lose. If Ohio State gets pushed around in the middle, they will lose. If Michigan is able to rush the ball 5 yards a pop, they will lose. Penn State was running right down the middle at Ohio State. And had they kept doing it, had they kept feeding their running back, had they kept feeding Allen, that game plays out differently. But they stopped. Michigan won't stop. Michigan proved that against Penn State. If Michigan is getting it done right down the middle, they won't stop. They will keep doing it. They will kill you 4, 5, 6 yards at a time. They will run Blake Corum 30 times if they need to. They will do that. They won't stop. They'll keep going. Ohio State has to stop it. Michigan won't stop it for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I had something down and I kind of changed my key matchup here, Jared, because I think it's very important here. And that's red zone efficiency. Ohio State was one of the best in 22, one of the best in red zone conversions here.
Saying this is a good call.
Was one of the best in red zone conversions here. 6th last year in red zone touchdown percentages. This year, offensively, Ohio State is 61st in red zone conversions. 85% of the time they score points. They have 47 trips in the red zone. Of those 47, they only have 29 touchdowns and 11 field goals. That is not great. Not great in terms of, and we've seen it a number of times too against lesser opponents, and Ohio State struggled in the red zone. Well,
we saw it just last week.
Michigan has the number 2 red zone defense in the country here. And we said it many times, and I think Jared says it more often than I do. You don't win games by kicking field goals. You got to find a way to get into that red zone or get into the end zone when you're down in your opponent's within 30 yards there. You gotta find a way to get that ball into the end zone there. You got playmakers with Marvin Harrison Jr. You got Trey. You got X. Emeka is healthy again. You got Stover. So much talent out there. Get the ball into your playmakers' hands there and let them at it.
Sorry, Kyle, but red zone efficiency. People will hear you say Ohio State was one of the best red zone efficient offenses in the country last year, and now they're not. And I guarantee you, most of the people listening said, well, that's what happens when you go from CJ Stroud to Kyle McCord. And I'm telling everyone, if that's your attitude, you aren't watching the same football I'm watching. Because the issue has been the offensive line. Ohio State had two of the best offensive tackles in the entire country last year. Thanos just destroyed TJ Watt in the NFL last weekend as a rookie. Both of them are starting for NFL teams, by the way. Yeah, as rookies and playing incredibly well. If you want to ask yourself, why did Ohio State go all the way to the cellar, from the penthouse to the cellar on their red zone efficiency? Most people are going to say Kyle McCord. It's not. It's losing Paris Johnson. It's losing Thanos. That is why.
One last stat here, Jared. Michigan's red zone defense. They've only had opponents get to the red zone 18 times all year, and of those 18, only 6 touchdowns.
Do you know how many of those have been in the past 3 games?
Ooh.
Listen, don't look it up, Kyle. Look it up. That's going to be a lot. That's going to be tough to figure out. But what I can tell you is that before the Penn State game, Michigan never, not once, played a defensive snap inside their own 10-yard line. Never, not once, played a snap inside their own 10-yard line defensively.
Holy shit.
That number has been blown to hell the past 2 weeks. I don't even know what the number is anymore. It's not a relevant stat anymore. Penn State did it a few times, just a handful of times, and then Maryland just blew the stat out of the water. I have no idea what the number is now. All right, Kyle. Kyle looks like he found something he likes. Did you find the question I asked?
Purdue. All right. Purdue, they had a touchdown 24 yards out, not red zone.
Cool.
Penn State, 11-yard, 1. 11-yard run, 1. 8-yard pass, 2. Maryland here, 1-yard touchdown, that's 3. 1-yard run, that's 4. 1-yard run, that's 5. 5 of their 6 red zone touchdowns in the past 2 games.
Huh. It's amazing how badly this team has fallen off in just the past 2 games. Wild how that happens. It's almost like there's some cheating ass motherfuckers. All right, Kyle, we're supposed to be doing our predictions right now. I think we lost track of that.
It kind of was.
Oh, no, yeah,
it kind of was.
No, because of the red zone efficiency. No, we're still on track there. We're still on track. All right, Kyle, this is it. It's time to make our predictions. The spread pick, Kyle, this is the first time we've done this year. Ohio State is dogged by 3.5 points. I have a long-standing policy that applies to both Ohio State and Alabama, that if you give me the opportunity to pick them at -6.5 or better, I will take it 100% of the time. You give me an opportunity to pick Ohio State, not just under 6.5 points, but as a dog, every time. I will take that every time. 100% of the time. I don't care. 100% of the time.
You would be nuts not to pick Ohio State as an underdog in this game. You're giving that team up north 3.5 point buffer.
Technically,
No.
Ohio State has the buffer.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
I got the final score here. The team in scarlet and gray, 24. The team in cheating in blue, 20.
All right. No joking. No meme this time. Sorry, everybody. It's wrinkled because I'm cleaning out some things, but it's timely. It's also appreciated. This T-shirt, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, this T-shirt available for purchase. Merch.thesloopcast.com. My final score prediction: Ohio State 31, Michigan 17. And honestly, I feel like that's a lot of points. I would not be shocked if it was like 21-10. I feel like 21-10 is absolutely on the table.
You got two of the best defenses here, and Ohio State at times has struggled offensively, and recently Michigan hasn't shown to be that great of an offense either. Yeah, it definitely could be a really low scoring game.
Yeah, I mean, we've had gambling in Ohio for almost a year now. I've not placed one bet yet. And there's a Sloopcast rule to say don't real life gamble. But man, do I feel really good about Ohio State dogged and taking the under in this game.
Absolutely. Hey, who's our guest picker this week, Jared?
Our guest picker is Zach. His name is currently Trey Henderson down in the chat. What does he have to say, Kyle?
He has here Big Daddy of them all, the game, the Ohio State Buckeyes heading up to the Northern Toilet Bowl. Teton's defense will be feisty, but I don't think they have the back seven to cover the studs of Stover, Emeka, and the GOAT, Marv. The OL has been on point these last couple of weeks, and Trey is a dog. And that's actually a good point. The offensive line maybe getting some good confidence boost with the way that they've playing too. That's a good point. Defense is one of the best in the country, if not the best. McCarthy has thrown a touchdown in the last 3 weeks. And injuries are starting to show, especially ego from getting caught cheating. Give me the Buckeyes in the shithouse, 24, scum 14, and oh, by the way, fuck Desmond Howard.
Absolutely. Third Tim Biakapatuka in there too. Kyle, how much of a factor would you say?
Dude, like, what was that?
How much of a factor would you say it is the fact that Harbaugh is not on the sidelines? Like he gets
very little.
You don't think
very little?
Very little. You think so?
Very low. Well, let me rephrase that. Little in terms of the team as a whole. I think McCarthy is absolutely missing Harbaugh on the sideline.
I think that's a good take. Kyle.
And by the way, I don't know if we've mentioned it before or not, but yeah, I completely agree, Zach. Like, fuck Desmond Howard, the way that he's been acting these last few weeks, just so childish and just laughing at everybody who talks about the scandal going on at Michigan, and he's like, oh, just laughing all over them. Like,
everyone,
like, dude, grow the fuck up.
Everyone gets so mad at Herb Street because Herb Street doesn't like homer for Ohio State enough, according to Ohio State fans. But like, do you want Herb? But this is the alternative. Do you want Herb Street being a clown and just being a joke the way Desmond Howard is? Is that what you want? Is that what you want, Ohio State fans? Do you want Herb Street to lose all credibility and be a clown like Desmond Howard? I want the happy medium, but I prefer Herb Street's approach. I love Hermie because he's not a homer. Yeah, I don't know how Desmond is still on College Game Day. Because someone ran something that says that he attracts a certain amount of audience. I don't know.
From a certain university.
Maybe.
All right. Let's get into. We are running really long. Let us.
Kyle, it's Ohio State, Michigan. I don't care.
As expected. All right. We have Austin's over-unders here. It is the Cheaters up north week. Let's get right into it. First one here, he has McCord passing yards for the game. 276.5 yards.
Under.
That's a lot. I'm taking the under.
If Ohio State ends up scoring a bunch of points in this game, and by a bunch I mean 31, just to be clear, I don't mean a bunch by college football standards, I mean a bunch by NFL standards. It'll be because Trey broke some long ones, or it also could be some broken long passes too, but I think it'll mostly be on Trey's back, in my opinion.
All right, the next one here, Jared, is Trey rushing yards at 146.5 yards.
Over.
Which is what he had against Minnesota last weekend. You know what? I originally wrote under. But you know what? Screw it. I'm going over. I'm going to go over here. Fun fact, Jared. Fun fact. Trey has, what is that here? Has 84 less yards than Blake Corum for the year on 60 less attempts.
Good stat. Good stat. I like that stat. Kyle is that good. Well, from whose
that
perspective?
Is very good. That puts Trey at almost 7 yards a carry. Not to take away from his 13 yards per reception as well. Give Trey the ball. Really, like, if it was Trey total yards at 170, I'd still take the over.
That's a lot. 170 is a lot.
Which is what he had against Minnesota last week. So, and he had against Rutgers as well. When he's healthy, he gets over 170 yards.
Sign stealing aside, this is still an incredibly talented front seven Michigan.
All right, next one. Ohio State forced turnovers at 1.5. I'm going to go under. Ohio State doesn't really turn the ball over that much. Recently, yes, but for the season, I'm going to take the under. I would love to see McCarthy throw 3 picks in this game.
No, but he means the defense forcing turnovers. That he said it right, Austin. Ohio State has not forced a ton of turnovers this year. That just is what it is. Quite frankly, they haven't been on the field a lot, which can lead to them not getting a lot of turnovers. It's kind of a, suffering by your own success a bit. If this game is if I gave like 2 separate score predictions, right? I said like 31-17, and then I said like 21-10. If this is the 21-10 version of the game, then forced turnovers, or at least the turnover margin, could be the difference maker. It really, really could be the difference maker in this game. Like that one turnover, which, by the way, is what did Maryland in. Maryland had a real opportunity. And then there was that one turnover, which then turned into a second turnover. And then there was the safety on the blocked punt. Maryland did themselves in, guys. Avoiding those mistakes and hell, maybe forcing a couple is probably the difference maker in this game.
Yep.
Wait till JJ faces an actual defense. I mean, they faced one against Penn State. The problem with what happened with Penn State was that their defense got totally just gassed at the end, because their offense couldn't keep them off the field.
Yeah. All right. J.J. McCarthy, passing attempts at 16 and a half.
If it's over, Ohio State wins. If it's under, Ohio State loses. I'll tell you that much.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why I picked over.
McCarthy completed a whole 8 passes versus Penn State. Is that how many he completed or how many he attempted?
He was 7 for 8 against Penn State. He is 12. He's completed 12 passes in the last 6 quarters that he's played.
That's such a cheap stat because he didn't even attempt a pass in the second half of Penn State. That's such a cheap stat.
But a fun stat, though.
True.
All right. You got over or under in this one, Jared?
I'm going to go over.
All right. Next one here, we have Tommy Pickles Eichenberg tackles at 8.5.
Over.
We go over. I'm going to go over.
They're going to need to blitz, and it's I think going to be pretty frequently Tommy Eichenberg. They're going to need to run blitz in order to, like I said, stop Michigan from turning this into 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I think they blitz from the edge, Austin says. I think it depends upon game situation. I think that there needs to be and stunt inside. Yeah. But, I still think that there'll be a fair amount of like a gap blitzes from Tommy. I would say they're still going to, both are right. We're both right. They're going to do both of those things.
So you got over?
Yeah, I got over.
All right. Stover catches. Oh, nope, I missed one. Sorry. Marv Yards at 144.5 yards. It seemed like a lot. It seemed like a lot.
My biggest issue with Marv getting 145 yards through the air is I don't think Ohio State's gonna be able to throw the ball deep in this game. Yeah. I don't think that the Ohio State offensive line is going to give Kyle McCord the time to throw deep in this. So if he's going to get 145 yards, it's either going to have to be via broken tackles, or just through an incredible volume of passes. I'm going to go under. I think he gets about 80 yards. I think this is a Trey game.
If he gets the Austin says he said you forget I already told you he's getting 11 catches, 168 yards and 3 tutties. If he gets that kind of numbers,
we win. Ohio State.
We win. Hold on. We win. But you can almost etch his name into that Heisman then if he has that kind of numbers.
I don't know about that. It's so hard for a receiver, but he guarantees gets a plane. He guarantees has a plane.
This is the year. This is the year for a wide receiver to get it though.
He gets a trip to New York with those numbers, but I never guarantee a Heisman win unless it's a quarterback, in which case I'll consider guaranteeing a Heisman win.
Mm-hmm.
Unless Bo Nix wins out, in case can't get it from LSU. People are like, I know LSU sucks, but he's really good. Like we've decided. Daniels, thank you. People have started the, well, why can't a quarterback on a bad team get the Heisman campaign? So I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Stover, 4.5 catches. I'm going over with this one. I think Stover is going to get involved a lot in this game, so I'm going over.
I agree. I think this is, yeah. I think this is like a Marvin Harrison decoy game, much like what we saw last week. I think it's Marvin Harrison going deep a lot. I think it's Julian Fleming going deep a lot to give Ohio State some space underneath, in which you then see Emeka and Stover get a good volume of catches. Yeah. Austin says Yodi, and then he says Emeka eats. Yeah, I think if we're looking at, I don't know about yards. Yards are hard to predict, but if we're looking at the volume, I think the volume's going to Emeka and Stover in this game.
All right. Next one here is yards per carry for Michigan at 4.79 yards.
Has to be under. If Ohio State wants to win, it has to be under.
Got to be under.
It's got to be. Stover is going to moss a linebacker, isn't he? I hope so.
JT, sacks and tackle for losses combined over under 2.5.
That's a big number. It's hard to predict any one defensive player getting that. So I'm just going to say under out of principle, but it's totally possible.
I agree. Yeah, that's
Michigan O-line isn't as good this year. They're not as good, but they're still very good. But a large part of specifically this stat will be the health of their offensive tackles, which is not known at this point. They aren't as well informed. I mean, true.
Roman Wilson targets their main receiver, 7.5 targets in this game.
This is a Loveland game. Even if Roman Wilson plays, which I think he will, I assume he will, which I don't, but I don't think that's a guarantee. Also, like in a game in which we're asking, will JJ McCarthy even throw the ball 16, 17 times to say any one player will get over 8 targets feels like a lot. Especially, like I said, when this feels more like a tight end, especially Loveland game, than it does a wide receiver game. With JJ McCarthy struggling to throw the ball, I wouldn't be surprised to see them totally abandon their wide receivers, especially when Ohio State's corners are playing so damn well. They're just going to focus underneath to the tight ends for most of the game.
Tyleek tackles 4.5. It's always tough for a defensive tackle to get that many tackles, but he has been this game. He has been recently.
But also, this is Michigan runs the ball 60% of their plays. And if I had the stat for just the past 2 weeks, I'm sure it's much higher than that. I'm positive it's much higher than that. So Tyleek will get his opportunity to get over 5 tackles.
Well, I'm going to go under. I think he'll get 3 or 4. Good line there, but yeah, if he gets like 5, 6 there, that tells me that Tyleek is doing his job and stuffing that run there.
Yeah, for sure. But I was just saying, this does feel like the type of game in which the defensive tackles are kind of occupying blockers, leaving a lot of tackles to be had for, I'm going to say Simon. And Eichenberg is going to get he's shopping for tackles at Costco this week. He's buying his tackles in bulk. Like, he's going to get a ton of tackles in this game. And Cody Simon will probably be right behind him, and probably also Sonny Styles, I feel like, are going to rack up tackles this week.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Michigan sacks on McCord at 2.5. You know, I'm going to go under. I'm going to go under that.
I think it's a perfect line. I think it's a perfect line. Like I think it's 2 or 3 feels like the correct answer. So I'm gonna say under, and I'm going to say that primarily because I think Ryan Day is going to do his best to make sure that doesn't happen as far as quick passes and just trying to get rid of, and quite frankly, running the ball. Again, I think this is a Trey game.
Yeah. Corum touchdowns 1.5. So my prediction was 20-24. So that means Michigan would have 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals. So I'm going to go under. I think Corum will get 1. Like they'll have a drive and they'll punch it in the red zone there. But yeah, I'll go under for this one.
I'll go under. He'll get 1. He could very easily get 2, but just the likelihood of that second one going to a quarterback sneak or to Edwards is just too high. And I'd be surprised if they get 3 touchdowns this game, personally. This is such an under game. This is an under game.
Ohio State third down percentage at 59.59. Speaking of the unders game here, I'm going to go under as well too, just because of the type of defenses are in this game. If Ohio State gets over 50% third down conversions, I'd be very happy, and I expect Ohio State to be able to move the ball really well.
Ohio State on the season is only converting 46.21%, and this defense is, even again, Connor Stallions, yada yada, all that aside, this is still a very good defense. So I'm going under on that.
All right, and the last one here, over under 0.5, as is tradition, Jared. 0.5 is the over under.
Yeah.
For the amount of dams we give for that whole state of Michigan.
Under. I go under.
I agree.
All right, is that all of them?
That is all. There was one other question up here. If Ryan Day beats Michigan and gets blown out in the playoffs, would this still be seen as a successful season for Ohio State?
I mean, I guess it depends upon what blown out means. You know what I mean? Like, do they hang with 42-17? But even then, like, how does that 42 is it like 21-17 or 20 or 28-17 at halftime, and then it gets just some points thrown up at the end? Or are we talking like 35-0 at halftime? You know what I mean? Competitive 8 minutes into the third quarter. Yeah, then I would say yes. I mean, I also assume that you win the Big Ten championship, you beat Michigan, you have a perfect regular season. And then, like, the offensive line finally fails. And, which is just what we've been saying all year, that the offensive line will eventually let us down. I know. I'm just saying, like, I'm not. Any year you beat Michigan and win the Big Ten's a good year. Does that make it a great year? No. But I'm not going to call that season a failure.
Yeah, I would say, to answer this question, I say, is this still seen as a successful season? Successful, yes. But I think this type of team can win the national title this year. They really can, with the flaws that they have, because every team has their flaws, and we've seen it. But I would consider this a success if Ohio State beats Michigan and gets blown out in the playoffs, I would still call it a success.
Let's include beating Iowa, winning the Big Ten.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
Florida Buck says if it's
Jared.
blown out by SEC, I'd say no. If we get blown out by Washington somehow, I can live with it slightly more. Honestly, true. I and even more so if it's like Oregon, because like I just respect the living hell out of Oregon. I think that matters too, just from a perception standpoint. I think you're right, Florida Buck. I think you're absolutely right. All right, Kyle, that's the end of the show, is it not? Is that the end of the show?
Yeah, that is it. That is all I have.
Do you have anything in Kyle's corner?
No, I'm not even going to try.
That's fair.
Go crew.
There you go. Go crew. Kyle, I don't know how far back this tradition goes. I think it goes back a few years, but we always play the Dead Schembechlers at this point in time. They're a parody punk band out of the Columbus area. They've made some funny anti-Michigan songs through the years in the tradition of like 70s punk rock. So that's what we're doing, as we always do at this point. So tonight's ending music brought to you by the Dead Schembechlers. So with all that being said, I'd like to encourage everyone to drink local beer, listen to local music, and of course support your local podcasters. Once again, these are the Dead Schembechlers.